Hi friends, my name is Al, or Little Starner. Today we're going to be using the watercolor palette that I made last month. I don't know. I don't know when that was, a bit ago. Not that long ago, but a bit ago. So in that video, I mentioned for some reason I thought that they were gonna dry overnight and I'd be able to use them right away. Obviously I couldn't, and I did some research and it said it would take 2 to 5 days to dry. That was not the case. I honestly, how long has it been? I mean, it's been we'll say about a month. We'll say between, maybe more like 2 weeks. When did that video come out? Hold on. 2 weeks ago, so maybe 3 weeks. We'll say 3 weeks ago I made this, and there are still some that are tacky to the touch and shiny. Most of them have become matte and obviously very dried looking, but some of them did seem maybe whether they just had a different formula, consistency, and that's the way they dried, but some did still feel like they weren't fully dry. The gouache dried super cracked, which is, I don't know, fine. I mean, I don't know what they're supposed to look like, but I figured that they wouldn't look the same as the watercolor. And overall, it dried just looking really pretty. I just love, it was so yummy looking. Not as yummy as when they were fresh, kind of one day in and they were kind of shiny and flat and matte. I don't know, pretty. They're very pretty. And it's still pretty, but not quite as pretty. Anyways, before we get further into it, let me take a moment to thank my patrons. Your names are on screen. Thank you so much for supporting me. I will also include pictures of the rewards, the physical rewards for this month. Every month I do exclusive stuff, including a postcard and a sticker that gets mailed to you. There's also a podcast that I do every month, an exclusive video. It's a full-length video. It's what I do here, but sometimes it's more chill, more relaxed, more fun. And there's other stuff too. So if that's interests you at all, or you want to support me further, that's a great way to do it. It'll be linked down below. Thanks to my patrons. I also want to thank today's sponsor, Dossier. I have worked with Dossier for a while now, and I really love their scents. I have a staple. It's marshmallow vanilla. I wear it almost every single day. I love the way it smells, especially as someone who sweats a lot and lives in Florida. I really appreciate having Dossier around. But Dossier isn't like other fragrance companies. They're here to make designer scents affordable and accessible and sustainable. Some of these designer scents can be alarmingly pricey, and Dossier was hey, that's not necessary. You don't need to make them that expensive, so we're gonna make them and not make them that expensive. Thank you, Dossier. You can even find your favorite designer perfumes and then find the dupes on Dossier, and you can get that same scent without the stupid cost. Also, all of Dossier's packaging and perfumes are made sustainably, recyclable, and I really appreciate that. I cannot state enough how much I appreciate companies who care about our planet, my god. Okay, so I did get some restocks, because again, these are my staples and I love them. I got another floral marshmallow. Really can't state enough how good this one smells. I could really just sit here and smell it all day, honestly. I got ambery vanilla, and I got fruity brown sugar. I just got all my favorites again. It's so good. It's really so good. If you're a stinky guy, if you know a stinky guy, I can't recommend Dossier enough. I'm gonna leave the link down there for you to check out. Thank you so much to Dossier for sponsoring. Thank you. Now, without further ado, we're just gonna paint a painting. I don't think I really explained what we're doing. We're just painting a painting using the watercolor palette. I tried to come up with something that would kind of use as many of the colors as possible, and I did the sketch. I think it looks good. There's some iffy spots about it. I don't know. I wasn't really feeling particularly inspired to do anything. You might have seen my aquarium video. I was feeling inspired by that. So there are jellyfish in this painting. But yeah, the sketch is a little wonky. It's fine. We'll see how it works out. Let's go. Let's grab something for you to work on. Let's paint together. Let's go. So if you didn't watch my recent video where I put together this custom water palette, I highly recommend you go watch that video before you finish this one. And if you don't want to watch it, I'm sure you're smart enough to piece together what you might be missing, right? I trust you to fill in the gaps there. But the whole point of this video is a direct follow-up to that video, so recommended viewing. I was really excited to see how this palette would work, see if I had made good color choices, see how they performed after drying. Like I said in that video, I don't know all the science behind how watercolors work. In fact, in the comments of that video, I got some really helpful comments about my watercolors, about how they work. I got a really nice and thoughtful comment from Denise. Thank you so much, Denise. She's literally the ultimate authority on watercolor, so if you ever find yourself with literally any questions about watercolor, go check out her channel. It will be linked below. She is, in my opinion, the authority. But yeah, I personally know nothing. So even though logically I knew that drying the tube watercolor wouldn't suddenly make them different paints or ruin them or make them unusable, I was still, I was like, surely they will not work that well once they're dried into pans. I don't know what it is. It's just the way that's what I kept thinking. I always feel like it's way harder to get watercolor pans to be super pigmented and vibrant in comparison to tubes. And I said that a few times on my channel before, and every time I'm told it's because I'm not using stuff that's like good enough quality, really good quality watercolors can be crazy vibrant. And I hear that. It's probably true. I'm not saying that's not true. I just don't think, I don't think quality is the biggest issue for me and the way I'm perceiving this possible issue. Because I am able to get those paints that I have, the pans that I have, to be pigmented as well. Like, they can definitely be vibrant. It just always takes a lot more work and a few tries to get the ratio of water to pigment right, that kind of stuff. It's not that I can't get pigmented pans because I'm just using really low quality stuff. I love the watercolor palettes I use. Otherwise, I wouldn't have kept so many. I do think they're good quality. It's not all of them. Some of the pans are always pigmented. Like, there are some pigments that are just like really, really saturated and vibrant. There's some that are just always great and there's some that are always not good. But yeah, on average, I'm just used to pans taking a little bit longer to wake up and to fully become activated. It always takes a little bit more work for me than just squeezing paint out of a tube. So I was definitely holding my breath, thinking that there was a somewhat decent chance of me doing all that work just to find out, hey, this palette is basically unusable. But of course, logically, I knew that nothing was chemically or formulaically changing about these pigments and that they would function the same way. They would be just fine. They just, they're in a solid state now. Of course, the first thing I did was swatch the colors just in case, somehow I broke them or something. I did want to see what the swatching would look like just once it was its own palette, its own thing. I was moving pretty quickly through swatching. I didn't worry about really activating them despite, listen, my brain, I'm stupid sometimes. Literally the point of me swatching them was so I could make sure that they worked well still and that, to make sure that I didn't break them. And I was like, you know what? I can just do them really fast, right? I don't need to actually swatch. I was swatching them to make sure that they would work before painting. And I was like, why am I whatever, just one quick swipe with a brush and I'm sure that's fine. So by swatching, for some reason, I didn't swatch well. The swatches look horrible. All of them are really transparent. I would love to know why I do some of the things that I do. So unhelpful of me. But yeah, they were overall decent. I did still find out that, yes, at the very least, they haven't suddenly stopped being able to work, right? So based on my horrible swatches, I noticed right away that there were 3 colors that were very, very translucent. And they were some of the exact colors that I expected to give me trouble. They were the Apricot, Cad Yellow Light, and Naples Yellow. Naples and Apricot were Arteza. I believe Cad Yellow Light is the other one. I'm blanking. I was surprised by the Cad Yellow Light and how light that was with the first quick pass. Again, I just didn't activate it enough. It's not its fault, but that is a really, really vibrant yellow. So I was a little surprised to see how pale and translucent and desaturated it was. But the Apricot and Naples were not surprising to me at all. They're both Arteza colors, and they're kind of colors that, I don't really know what the term is. They're like pre-mixed, you know what I mean? Obviously, Naples Yellow is a very basic staple. It's not like, an unnecessary color, but specifically these Arteza tubes gave very superfluous pre-mixed colors. I talked about it in the video that Arteza had, the set is 60 something colors and you really just don't need that many. So there were a lot of obviously pre-mixed colors that you could easily make yourself. And these were 2 of those colors that just definitely seemed like filler kind of colors. I still think that they're great additions to the palette. I love those colors, but they are the kind of colors that I could just mix myself, right? So yeah, I really was not surprised that they didn't activate well immediately. I also noticed really quickly that all of the blues swatched the exact same, they all look the same. And while painting, I did keep pulling from all the different blues, and I was also still finding that they felt the same. Even the blue greens and the light blues, that area of the palette, those were all swatching the same too, a little, very, very similar. Too similar for my comfort. And the darker blues definitely swatched very, very similar. And like I said, while painting, I was getting frustrated because they definitely felt repetitive. But I think, to be fair, by the time I was using those darker blues and the painting was already muddy, so it might not be entirely the paint's fault, but while painting this specific piece, I was definitely struggling with all of the blues. I was trying to mix specific ones, and I would pull, I would test every single pan, and they all ended up mixing the same color. And I couldn't budget either way, and I don't know, I was just getting really, really frustrated with the blues. But like I said, I don't know if it's their fault, if it's the painting's fault, I don't know. I want to try using the palette again very soon with a focus on using the blues and see how those work more intentionally. And if I still feel like they're really repetitive blues, I might try and swap out the color somehow. I don't really know how that would work. Like, I don't know what happened. Like, do I just get a new pan and like but then what do I do with these? Like, if I pull out this one, replace it with a different half pan, what do I do with this full blue? Like, I don't know. I don't know what I would do. I also don't know what colors I would replace them with. So maybe my best bet is just to try to use them up really quickly. I don't know. You know, when I was putting together this palette, I honestly was kind of struggling just to come up with enough colors to fill it with. Like, I definitely had enough. I struggle is kind of a strong word. I think I would have to start getting into kind of more novelty colors. Like, I feel like I have a really good base palette here. I don't know what else I would need or what's lacking. So I really don't know what the solution would be to replacing these blues. It's so interesting to me that the blues did give me so much trouble, because I feel like with other palettes, I really highly value having specifically all different kinds of blues. I feel like blues often, I don't like mixing blues for some reason. I like having the blue that I want because I use blue for mixing other things. So I like having the blue that I want, and all of the blues that I picked for a specific reason. Like, they definitely have different purposes. I could look at the blues and tell you right now what I would use each one for. So it's so interesting that it was such a struggle. Like, I do like having a lot of blues in a palette. So I don't know, it's very shocking to me. And like, even now, just like looking retroactively, when I look at the original swatch sheet, I do feel like I could have cut one or two of those blues. I probably don't need all of those blues, which is just, I don't know, very, very surprising. Definitely some of them are great, and I would definitely want to keep. I really like having the dark kind of navy blue. I like having the light kind of cerulean blue. I like having a generic like kind of stock color blue, mixing blue. But yeah, I don't know. Again, I can see reasons for having all those blues. I could name them to you, but now that I've used them, it's like, wow, I really could have just kept those 3 blues and been fine. And then the last thing that I did notice was the gouache was very, very dull when swatching. Very desaturated, very thin and translucent, like so little pigment. Again, I did not take the time to properly wet and activate these pans before swatching. I did it all so quick with one really fast pass, so I wasn't shocked by that. I was a little worried that they wouldn't reactivate easily. I've never dealt with gouache that is like dried. I've never done that before, so I definitely don't know what to expect from them. I have a feeling they're going to be quite a bit harder to reactivate than regular watercolor pans would be, so it'll be interesting. It'll be very, very interesting. So those were my initial thoughts based on swatching. Now let's talk a bit about the thought behind the process of this piece, and then I'll finish with my thoughts on the performance of the palette, like overall, while using it specifically for a piece, if that makes sense. So this piece is based off a pin from Pinterest. It'll be linked down below. If not, if I forget to do that, my Pinterest is always linked, and then I have a board of art references, and anything I ever use is usually on that art reference board. So, but yeah, I found a few 80s women with like cool, you know, big feathered hair, and I was just really feeling those pins. The vibes were really nice, but I wanted to make sure I did something that had the potential for lots of color and fun stuff going on, different elements, because I wanted to use as many of these pans as possible, obviously. So I didn't want to just repaint the reference photo. I didn't want to just do a portrait. In fact, this is something I tend to struggle with. I think I did do a good job of using the reference as like just a reference and making it my own, you know, using it as a jumping off point. So props to me for that. I do like that. But anyways, to give it more room to use lots of color and be more interesting, I made her an elf. It's just a fun, I think the reference photo really it was giving elf to me. I was like, she really should have like these ears. I feel like they are there just hidden. So made her an elf. And I was trying really hard to think, that really didn't actually, now that I'm saying that didn't add anything. Like that didn't make it suddenly more colorful, but it was different, right? It was a change. And then I was trying really hard to come up with something for the background, for that extra element, something that would invite a lot of color in. And the only thing that I kept coming back to was the jellyfish that I had been so mesmerized by from my recent trip to the aquarium. I guess the quest for inspiration is already paying off, thank God. I don't know how great of a concept it is. I like it. I think the sketch was more fun, as it often is, but I think it's a fun concept. I didn't really make it as colorful as I could, but whatever. So, you know, now now we've got a pretty elf lady with some jellyfish. Not much reason behind it, not much thought, doesn't really make sense. Don't think too hard about it, but I thought it was a vibe. I liked it. It seemed like a good concept. I don't know if it is one, but it was different. The painting process went really well. I pretty much just set aside my reference photo and just had fun with the paints, which I think I'm learning is a better way for me to work, specifically with watercolor, especially for portraits. When I copy a reference photo, I get way too focused on all the color shifts, which specifically with this medium doesn't always work. I think a really good example is my Barbie painting. I was really trying to focus on being super accurate and realistic, getting all those shadows with all those different tones, and it ended up being a little too HD, a little too much detail. She was looking a little crazy, and I think watercolor, people who are more skilled than me in watercolor can pull it off. But for me, I think kind of having that softer, a little bit more stylized look where I'm not so worried about all of those tonal shifts and hyperrealism and shading and like lines in the face, I think it just looks a little bit better and more satisfying. Prettier in the sense of like aesthetically. There's not those like harsh well lines and stuff. So yeah, I think I'm glad I went with that. I think I should lean into that a bit more when I'm doing watercolor portraits. I think it just looks better. So anyways, yeah, I just started going in the skin tone. I did kind of, one base coat and kind of started building up after that. And it was much easier than what I normally do. I was building saturation. It took a bit longer than I wanted, than I was expecting, I think because of my own cowardice and not because of the palette, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Things definitely kept drying lighter than I wanted. I don't know if that's the paints or if I all of a sudden I feel like all watercolor knowledge that I ever have had has like left my brain. It is really hard to say, but I think this is a common issue that I have with watercolor, so I don't think it's the palette's fault. I absolutely love the colors of the skin. I have to say my palette was great for this skin tone. Like it was just so beautiful seeing the colors come together and how like saturated and lively it felt. I think the palette would be great for pretty much any skin tone. As I was swatching, like pulling the other colors, I definitely think there's great dark and medium skin tone colors here. Obviously I haven't tested that yet, so I don't know, but I think that this is a palette that would just work great for like any portrait. But yeah, I loved having that neon pink to use in the blush and to make sure it was like super rosy and warm feeling. The reds I had on my palette were also perfect. I think I only have like 2 reds, and I think one's kind of cooler and one's kind of warmer, which is something that I wanted to pull from my favorite gouache palette. I think that really, I didn't do it for every color. I think I kind of accidentally have that, but I think that really paid off. I think that's something that is great to keep in mind for any future palette making I do. Having both of those reds was great. I always struggle with reds on palettes. I never have like the exact red that I want. So having 2 that were perfect and then having that neon pink to mix them with, oh my God, like it was wonderful. And then also having like the orange to mix the neon pink with, it created some beautiful colors. So glad I put that neon pink in there. If you didn't see the other video, I was kind of iffy about it. I have a neon palette and there is, I think, a pink, red and orange, or maybe it's like a red, orange and yellow. There's a couple warm colors, and I was hesitant about adding the neon to this palette because I didn't want to make my neon palette that I, someone spent money on, I got it as a gift. I didn't want that to like go to waste because now I have a replacement. But I feel like this neon pink is different to any of those colors. And I also think, like, I'm so glad I did it because I do think it really paid off and adds a lot to this palette. So very happy with that. The skin was pretty easy to do overall, especially because I was going really simple, basic, a little bit more stylized. And I just focused on making it like pretty and flow, like blend well rather than being hyper realistic. So definitely easy process. The hair was a bit harder. I hadn't really planned much for this piece. I just did like a really quick doodle. And I realized like I didn't pick out a hair color or any color for anything beforehand. And so I just went in with brown. It seemed like the obvious, easy choice. But if you've ever watched me paint a portrait before or do any sort of portrait, you've probably heard me say that I just don't like doing hair. I really don't like doing it. I always phone it in. I'm always super lazy with it. I think for this piece, it came out pretty well. But yeah, I definitely did it very quickly. I didn't put that much effort in. I just don't like doing it. It just doesn't make sense to me. And then I try so hard in the face and then I was like, okay, I'm done. Like I don't want to keep working and there's still so much to do. So I was like, I'm so lazy on the hair. But then it came to the rest of the piece and and that's where the struggle really started. I just could not come up with what colors I wanted things to be, how I wanted to execute stuff. I knew no matter what, because this is where I really obviously strayed from the reference, I knew no matter what, it was not going to be a satisfying level of realism. I didn't think it was going to look good, and going in like that didn't lead me to a lot of confidence in making my choices. I always struggle with this part of a piece, especially with the background. I feel like my understanding of color ends after I finish with the skin. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I can do portraits and like maybe hair, and I understand some color theory, but then when it comes to having to do all of this, like, I just don't get it. Like, having to do, I don't know. I kind of knew I wanted the jellyfish to be blue. I was just stuck on that because that's one of the colors that, like, there was a light in the tank that I saw, and it did have blue as one of the light up colors. So like the jellyfish were turning different colors. One of them was blue, and I just thought that was really, really pretty. And I just thought it kind of made sense. So I worked around that. That was kind of my starting point when it came to color for the rest of the piece. I also obviously wanted to tie in the colors already used in the piece because I didn't want all of a sudden it to just be totally random and different. So I did like a pink background using, I think, one of the reds or maybe the orange, and then I mixed that with the neon pink, which I love the color it ended up being. And that was the same mixture I used for like a lot of her blush. So that actually, you know what? I'm saying that, I'm looking at it now. I feel like it's a little too pink. Could have been a little bit more orange, but anyways, that was kind of tying that in. It is a really nice color. I do like it. I don't know. It might be a bit much. I just don't know. I'm not good at this part. I don't think it really ties. It ties in well with her, but like nothing else is tying in either. I knew her clothing was going to give me a hard time. Like I said, it was supposed to be a Polish dress inspired outfit. Because if you don't know, I've also been into that lately. The patterns and details were going to be like aquarium or like fish-esque inspired, whatever, like just a tie-in to that. But all of that was very much lost, like very early on. I started having the issues with the blues, and there were spots on the paper that wouldn't accept pigment, like the paint wouldn't stick to, wouldn't stay wet, which happens sometimes on a lot of the paper that I use. That's I think a normal issue, but I feel like I experienced it a lot. It was just super annoying overall. I was just really, really struggling with the clothes. I really didn't love the way the clothes turned out, and it was also at that point that I was like so over painting in the process. I was ready to be done. The paper just couldn't dry fast enough for me to move on to the next step. I was just getting, I was ready to wrap it up, and I thought I would finish it. I was just like, just get it done. You know what I mean? So I thought I would finish it better with colored pencil, but then like I said, it was just not drying fast enough for me. So I didn't let it properly dry, and so I never really finished up the clothes. It is what it is. So the overall performance of the palette, I think it was great. I think having the neon pink was an amazing decision. Like I said, so glad I did that. It added a lot of bulk to my palette, a lot of impact, and I can see that being super valuable in any other paintings I'm going to do in the future. There were plenty of plans that I didn't reach for at all. I didn't even use like any green in this painting, so I didn't get to test those out. But of what I used, excluding blues, I thought they were exactly what I needed. At no point did I not have what I needed. Usually for every other palette that I use, there's always at least one color or like one like paint or something that isn't included, and I have to pull out an extra supply to kind of finish out my palette. But with this palette, at no point did I not have everything that I needed at my fingertips. I felt like the white gouache didn't quite pull its weight, but I think with a bit more work and patience, it would probably do what I needed it to do. I'm not sure. I don't know if it'll ever be quite as impactful as like a wet gouache would be, but I still think it's worth having in there. I knew it wouldn't be perfect when I thought to include it in the palette in the first place, so I wasn't really worried about that. I was very, very happy with my palette overall. I think I did a good job. I think it will take a few more tests to make sure it's exactly where I want it, like I said with those blues. I would love to try something green heavy so I can test those. I'd love to do a portrait with a darker skin tone, and I'd also love to try it out in the open just to make sure all of my bases are covered, because the point of this palette is that it's going to, like, cover all my bases and be everything that I need in one place. But I hope that overall I do end up with, thinking that it's a great palette, which I think I will. So, score. I don't know. I love the face. I do like the hair. I don't know if I said this is based off a Pinterest photo, which I will link down below. It's pretty. I really, really like the way the face looks. I think the paints worked wonderfully. Would love feedback on picking colors for everything else but face and hair. I feel like I run into this all the time when I do portraits. I put so much effort into face. I don't put that much effort into the hair, but that's fine. It all makes sense. It looks fine. And then I get to like the clothes and the background and the other elements, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, I want it to tie in. I want it to be similar colors. I want it to be a cohesive color palette, but then it looks like this, and like, why does it look like that? It's not bad. Like it's just like I'm disappointed. Like the sketch was like looking really cool. It's supposed to be kind of like a Polish inspired like blouse with like the vest, the tie-up vest. And I don't think that's reading, and I think the colors are weird. And the little detail on her sleeve was supposed to be like an applique, but the gouache wasn't gouaching quite as much as I wanted it to gouache. And so it doesn't really look like that. I don't know. It just looks weird. Like, it's fine. It's really not the worst thing I've ever painted. I will be selling it. I just don't need to keep this. I like it. I do like it, and I think the face is really pretty. So I'm gonna have a copy for myself. But I'm just gonna sell the original because I really just don't need to keep this lying around. I'm not gonna use it for anything, so it will be in my shop. Every time I say that, people are like, you really need to stop insulting your stuff and then tell people you're buying it or you're selling it, because no one's gonna want to buy it. That's fine. You don't have to buy it. Also, you don't need my permission to like it to want to buy it. Like, I can dislike it and still sell it. Guys, this is the best painting I've ever painted. You should really spend $1,000 on it. I don't like it that much. I'm not gonna keep it. I'm selling it. Okay. Every time I get that comment, I just think it's so funny. That was so salty for no reason. I don't know where that came from. Calm down. Yeah, I really love the colors. I love her face. I think her face is so pretty. Like, the colors, the paints worked really well. Like I said, the gouache didn't gouache as much as I wanted it to. That's fine. I feel good about it. Like, I feel good about the palette. I think it definitely did what I wanted it to do. I think I made a good palette. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. Just kind of talking. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Dossier for sponsoring. Remember to check them out. The link is down below. That's it. That's all I have to say. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, like, comment, subscribe, the whole shebang. Thank you to Dossier for sponsoring. Check out this piece if you want to buy it. Check out my shop. It should be there. I mean, it should. That's it. Bye. Talk to you later.